This episode is proudly supported by Westholme Australian Wagyu. Whether you're a chef or just love going to restaurants, you know the best ingredients are everything, especially when it comes to beef. Westholme, based in Queensland and the Northern Territory, Australia, is working with the land to create nature-led Australian Wagyu. They steward 16 million acres of rangeland, guided by the natural ecosystem where cattle graze and forage on native grasses for the first few years of their lives. The result is high-quality Wagyu beef that reflects the terroir of Northern Australia. Westholme believe that when nature leads, flavour follows. Learn more at westholme.com.
I love this industry and I hope to be a part of it, for the rest of my life. And it's just been a joy to learn from, the people that I've worked with.
Hey there, it is Dani Valent with you for another episode of Dirty Linen. And as always, I'm super grateful to you for giving me your time and your attention. I definitely do not take it for granted. It's a privilege to be in your ears. And I actually do feel pretty privileged to be chatting to today's guest. Her name is Alice Taylor. She is speaking to us from her home in New Zealand. And I reckon I could describe Alice as one of those slashies that seems to be able to do absolutely everything. She ditched academia to become a chef. She is a very accomplished pastry chef. She's worked in one of New Zealand's best restaurants. She's written a book and I've had it on high rotation in my kitchen. It's called Alice In Cakeland. Special mention to the pineapple upside down pudding. But Alice is, I guess, endlessly hungry for new adventures, and I can't wait to chat about all things with her today. Alice, welcome to Dirty Linen.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's great to have you on the show. I was so happy that I got to meet you when you came over to Melbourne for the Food and Wine Festival. Let's start there. Tell us about, that chapter of your life, what you were up to and the amazing dessert you put in front of me.
Yes, so I went over, it was actually my first time I've ever done a collab with a restaurant and, gone to a different destination. So for about 6 months I was working at Paris Butter. It's an incredible restaurant in Herne Bay in Auckland, New Zealand. And it was a really wonderful experience for me because it was sort of the first time that I was, managing a section and, certain dishes. So it was a great learning curve. And I got the opportunity to come over for Melbourne Food and Wine. I've been to Melbourne before and absolutely loved the place. And it was just an amazing experience. And we put up a dessert that we had been, doing at Paris Butter back in Auckland. It's a pear dessert with yogurt and macadamia and cumin. And I just loved it. I had a lot of fun and, very grateful for that experience.
Yeah, well, it was really great to have you. And I think what I loved about that dessert was just the different flavors, the different textures. It felt like you were really not afraid to experiment with putting different things together. Would that be fair?
Yeah, absolutely. And it was certainly, it was a collaboration, with all of us chefs, but obviously from the direction of Chef Zenon. But it was just great to be a part of that and to see sort of the conceptualization of a dish from the start. And for me, with my personal preference and palate, I like dishes that are or desserts especially that aren't too sweet and are sort of balanced in the same way that we look at a savory dish. I think often we forget about balance in desserts, but a great dessert needs balance. So it was really fun developing that dish and very proud of it.
Absolutely, and so you should be. So Alice, you would have come to most people's attention in New Zealand through your time on MasterChef, but that wasn't the start of your love affair with food. Do you want to take us back to the beginning and, tell us about all things Alice?
Yeah, so I've always loved food. I've always been surrounded by great cooks. So my dad is an amazing chef. He's not the best baker, to be honest, but he's a great chef. And my grandma and my nan were also amazing bakers. So was my mum. And so I've always been obsessed with food. And I remember from a young age, like people would be reading novels and I'd be reading cookbooks, which was quite bizarre. Like from like really like maybe 7 or 8 years old. So I've always been obsessed with cookbooks, and then I went on to do my PhD. My PhD. No, not my PhD, not yet. I went on to do my political degree and continued to cook, and got a food columnist position with the Critic. It was just volunteering. The Critic was like the student magazine. So I've always been kind of writing about food and pursuing politics as well, because they're my two loves. They still are. And then I was a bit lost as to what to do with my life. And my dad texted me that MasterChef New Zealand was coming back for the first time in several years. And I applied and got on. And so I still think that, all of my experience before that really sort of benefited not only my application, but just my knowledge about food and my love for food. So yeah, it's been a long journey.
Do you think, let's talk about food and politics. Like, do you feel like they're separate strands of interest, or do you feel like they overlap and intersect?
Well, this is really like going into how I just think on a daily basis, because for me they completely overlap. But it's been an interesting experience since being on MasterChef. Often people can't comprehend what I've done. They think that like I've done this, 180 in my career, and doing something completely unrelated, becoming a chef. When I don't see it like that at all. I think that there's the intersection between food and politics is very understudied, but it's super important. And in the future, I would love to combine my two loves, but I think people don't really understand that. And even I remember I've talked to a university that I will not name about a PhD, and I said I'd love to do it on food politics. And they were just really confused. They were like, yeah, but the role of food and politics, and how are those two connected? Which is concerning, because, food is highly political in the way we communicate with each other and understand each other, as well as, you can look at if a state or if its people have enough food or not enough food. There's so many topics that you could branch out in. But yeah, I think that food and politics are very related.
That's quite baffling that a university would not see that food and politics are inextricable. One of the reasons that I love writing about food and, engaging with food in all kinds of different ways is that it overlaps with every other arena of life.
Exactly.
Environment, immigration, supply chain. It's everything. It's
everything. It's everything.
What are some of your special interests in that area?
It's. I have a lot of interest in that area. My research for my master's was on security and international relations, and even I think it's very interesting to look at the role of food within that. I've looked a lot at food as a weapon, or the weaponization of food, and that can be both negative, but also you can look at the utilization of food, as a signaling or as a means to sort of collaborate with other countries and states in positive ways. So that's like from my background in political science, that's where I go. But also things like, I find it really interesting to look at, how do we view food from other states, and how do we talk about food from other states? Even Indigenous food. How do we view Indigenous food in different countries, and do we celebrate and understand and recognize that? To me, it's all political. And then you can also look at, the cost of living now. It's exceptionally high in a lot of countries, in New Zealand, and also I know in Australia, the cost of living has risen. And that in itself, the cost of food is a political conversation. So there's many layers to it. There's many ways that you can look at it. There's conversations that can be had, forever. But I'm interested in all of it, to be perfectly honest.
Absolutely. So am I. Do you think that people struggle with you being a young woman that loves to bake and you being a serious intellectual at the same time?
Yes, I think that they do. I think that they do, and I think that I'm in an interesting stage in my life actually because I've left my job at Paris Butter, so I'm sort of looking at what am I going to do in the next chapter. I've been having many conversations, and I think that some people really think it's great the unconventional nature in which I've gone about my career, but I think other people don't really get it, and I do wonder, especially my age, the role that has in influencing opinions. So I think being a young woman in an industry is in any industry has its own set of challenges, of course. But I think for me, I've definitely felt that sometimes people can't understand. Oh, she bakes and she came out with a pink book, about baking. But she's also, I take my political career also seriously, so I think it's a little bit challenging for some people to understand. And then on the other side there's many people that are incredibly supportive of it, so that's great as well.
So what, Alice, are some of the things that you've been, I don't know, dipping a toe into or wondering if they're the next step for you?
Well, I think for me, a real goal of mine going forward is to try to find a way in which I can combine, my love of politics and my love of food. And I think that there's certainly several ways in which I can do it, but I'm just making sure that I take the time to figure that out and explore all of my options. But that really is the goal going forward, is, to combine my interest in politics and my love for food, and writing as well. I love to write. So that's sort of my main focus. I think I've spent the last few years, and one of the things that I've really proud of that I've done in the last 5 years especially was to really truly discover those loves and sort of figure out my purpose, and I do believe it's in that sort of area, so that's what I'm looking for going forward.
I'd love to talk a bit more about Alice in Cakeland because, it's such an achievement to do a cookbook. It's not easy to gather the recipes, to make sure they work, to cook everything for the photos. Tell us about that process. What did you enjoy and what was challenging?
Oh, honestly, I loved it. I think it was really a dream come true for me because I've always wanted to write a cookbook, and I've been obsessed with cookbooks, my whole life. So when the opportunity presented itself, I was just beyond excited. And the process of writing the book was so much fun, honestly, because I had pretty much written the book in my head, for years. But also I had submitted cookbook manuscripts, I think, when I was 15. So, 8 years before I got the deal, I started submitting cookbook manuscripts, which all failed, but that's okay because I got there in the end. So it was just such an enjoyable experience to bring, recipes from my childhood and recipes that I was also learning as a chef, talking to really, amazing chefs and developing those recipes together. And my probably the best experience for me was, coming back up to Auckland and shooting the book. It was just the most fun I've ever had in my life. And it's just been such a rewarding experience. And now that the book's out, honestly, the thing that makes me the most happy is when people send me the recipes that they've made. And, I get any feedback, good or bad, but just that people are engaging in my recipes is such a rewarding feeling. So it's been an amazing experience. It's been challenging, of course, writing a book and, working really long hours in a kitchen's quite hard, but very rewarding.
Yeah, that's so great. There's nothing like somebody cooking your recipe. I find it so humbling because, they've gone to the trouble of getting the ingredients and they're putting so much trust in you and your recipe, aren't they?
Yeah, exactly. So, especially right now, I feel very grateful if someone is willing to pay for my book and to cook to bake a recipe from it, and if they enjoy it, it's just such a wonderful feeling.
You mentioned your dad's not the best baker. Baking is something that a lot of people find challenging. How have you tried to unlock that for people with your book?
Well, I think that baking and pastry as well is there's a sort of like, how do I put it in an eloquent way? But I feel like baking, it's seen as a science, which it definitely is. But I think that scares people because they feel like there's even more rules and instructions, and they have to follow them. And if they don't have one ingredient, then it's doomed. Or if they, don't know exactly what to do, then they won't succeed. But I actually think that's not true. And because I started baking so young, I had so many trials and errors that I actually really enjoy the experience. So I think for me with my book, I wanted to make it accessible in the sense that if you don't have this ingredient, it's okay, use another, it'll still turn out good. I wanted to make it seem more easy and fun and approachable because it really isn't particularly complicated in my opinion. If you're having fun and you've kind of got a good base recipe there, the world's your oyster.
Have you got any favourites through the book?
I love the raspberry sour cream cake, which is the one on the cover. That's amazing. My partner, it was my birthday yesterday actually, and my partner made it for me. And he is a chef, to be fair, but he's not the sort of the keenest baker. And he's like, this is the best recipe I've baked. It's so easy. You need one bowl and one whisk, and you just whisk everything together and it's done. And so I think that really epitomizes sort of what the book is meant to be. It's no complicated equipment. Everything's from the supermarket. It's relatively cheap. You can make everything within pretty much an hour. And it's just meant to be fun and enjoyable and delicious.
Another recipe that I've got my eye on is the chocolate crepes with burnt orange, caramel and fennel cream. And again, like the dessert that you put up at that Melbourne Food and Wine dinner, it uses a spice that people probably associate more with savoury dishes in something sweet. Can you tell us about your thinking behind that recipe?
Yeah, well, that recipe was developed while I was working at Amisfield, which is down in Queenstown. Many people would have heard of Amisfield. And at the time, they were putting a duck dish on, and it had a sauce which had burnt oranges in it. And there was also a lot of fennel floating around, and I've always loved fennel. And so that was sort of the inspiration, because the pastry section at Amisfield's really interesting. They often use flavours that are incredibly savoury. And so, working with Chef Vaughan and Becky, who's the pastry chef there, kind of opened my eyes and my mind up to, the fact that actually ingredients can be manipulated and used in so many ways. And so that very much was a product of my work at Amisfield and my understanding of flavour sort of changing over that period of time.
I mean, as you say, people may have heard of Amisfield, but to have the experience of working in that restaurant must have been extraordinary. For people who don't know about it, just give us the 101 on what sort of restaurant it is and tell us about your time there.
So Amisfield is it's an incredible restaurant. It's also a vineyard. It's down in Queenstown. It's #1 restaurant in New Zealand by the Good Food Awards, and it's also, I want to say, Chef Vaughan is 44th in the world out of the 100 best. I could be wrong, so you might want to fact check that. But anyway, it's an exceptionally good restaurant. And Vaughan was a judge on MasterChef New Zealand, and that's how I met him. And he said to me when I was eliminated, come back to me in a year when you've got some experience and I'll give you a job in the kitchen. And so that's exactly what happened. And it was an unbelievable experience for me because these chefs are like Olympians. Like, they are very, very, very good at their job. And I was incredibly new to chefing. I'd been a chef for less than a year when I was put in that kitchen. And they were so kind to me as well. And that was, I think, the thing that I remember from it. They were amazing chefs, but they just wanted to teach me. And because I was willing to learn and listen, we just had a wonderful sort of friendship. And I think also what Amisfield taught me was the power of teamwork, because it really is this well-oiled machine and everyone has a part to play in it. But yeah, my time at Amisfield was probably the most challenging thing I've ever done. I was incredibly out of my depth, but it was also just very rewarding and I learned a lot, and I'm very grateful for that experience.
I haven't been there. Hopefully I'll get there one day. But, from what I've seen, there are these long tasting menus. Some of the dishes are quite challenging. Like, what sort of give us an insight into some of the dishes that Vaughan and the team put up?
Well, I mean, I'm most familiar with the pastry dishes because because that's what I was doing. But I think for Vaughan, he's really trying to reconnect people with nature, and especially, the whole beast. And I think even if we want to go back to the politics of food, I think that's a political statement in itself that I really sort of enjoyed learning about. And his dishes are incredible. There's definitely a pattern that runs throughout, which is sort of this idea of celebrating nature in its form, and that's the beauty, is it's undisrupted form. And so, one of the dishes that came on the menu when I was working there that was very exciting to be a part of was the antler deer milk ice cream. So deer milk is very high in fat. It makes the best ice cream, and we served that with a sauce that was made. It looked like blood, but it was made from smoked beetroot and wild pasture honey. And to serve the ice cream, they're shaped as antlers on the actual deer head to people was an interesting experience, because the reactions were varied, but it's a very cool thing to be a part of. And I think Vaughan's great, especially at creating these incredible concepts and then executing them into delicious dishes. So it was an amazing thing to be a part of.
Paris Butter is quite a different restaurant, I guess a little bit more traditional in its structure. What did you learn about hospitality from working there?
Well, Paris Butter is, it's very different to Amisfield. It was my second, fine dining restaurant. What I learnt from there was how much you could do with, a small team in a smaller kitchen. The dishes that they're putting out are they're just absolutely exceptional, and also very technical. I think that's what I learned the most from Paris Butter was just technique. They have a variety of skills, and I think as well, Paris Butter is maybe more classical in some respects, but it's also very innovative in how it combines flavors and takes flavors from many regions in the world and combines them and celebrates them. So that was another skill that I learned, and you can see that in the dish that we put out at Melbourne Food and Wine. Maybe it wasn't visually as different or as unique, but the flavors and the flavor profile was also very innovative and interesting. So just different style, but of so many things to learn from them as well.
Yeah, absolutely. There's so many ways to be creative. I suppose that's one of the things that you've learnt in your different experiences in the world of food.
Yes, exactly.
Side note to people who may not have listened to my chat on this podcast with Nick Honeyman, who is one of the founders of Paris Butter, but also spending a lot of time in France at Le Petit Lion. That was a really great chat. So refer you to that if you would like to know more about food in New Zealand and France. Alice, do you have a next move? Have you got, something that you're doing tomorrow, next week, in the next month that is going to keep you busy?
Yeah, I've got a few moves at the moment. Unfortunately, some of them I can't talk about yet, but they're very exciting. But for me, it's just writing. I think I just need to get in front of my laptop and just keep writing, look for some new opportunities, and to explore the politics of food. Maybe a few pop-ups or bakery pop-ups might be coming up soon, and it's just keeping my eyes and ears wide open to see what opportunities come forward. But I've just been spending a lot of time writing. I also had a break. I had a month off for the first time, and I think it was 7 years. So that was really nice. And now I'm ready to get back to work.
Oh, that's great. Well, I hope some of your adventures bring you back to Australia in the not too distant future. Alice, what have you learnt about the world of food and hospitality from, your various experiences?
I think for me, I learnt about the people that work in the industry, because, for me, I was always, up until my time on MasterChef, I was looking sort of at a bird's eye view at the industry, and I was going to restaurants and I was reading books, but I wasn't immersed in the industry. For me, it's been such a joy to actually work in hospitality and learn about the people. I've found some amazing friends, and it's been really eye-opening to me to not only learn about food, but learn about what it's like to work in hospitality and the sorts of people that are in there has been really interesting for me. So I love this industry, and I hope to be a part of it, for the rest of my life. And it's just been a joy to learn from, the people that I've worked with.
Oh, wonderful. Well, I cannot wait to see where the road takes you. I feel like it's going to be very exciting, intentional, and, draw lots of strands together. I look forward to many interesting conversations in the future, but thanks for giving us an insight into where you are right this moment.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'll keep diving into Alice in Cakeland for many delectable treats.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you so much.
This is Dirty Linen, and I'm Dani Valent. We air the issues that the hospitality industry finds hard to talk about, hearing from different people with unique perspectives. We want to hear from you as well. If you have something that needs to be said about a topic, get in touch so we can include your perspective. Contact us at dirtylinenat deepintheweeds.com.au or hit us up on Insta at Dirty Linen Podcast. We can't wait to hear from you.